Josh Allen, looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action.
Deep downfield, wide open.
Welcome into a new edition of the Going Deep podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Masseri, here with Mike Bunt. We're going to talk a lot about the Patriots today, and we have two very, very special guests to get into. And whoa, we got an action-packed show here. The U.S. men's national team moves on to the round of 16 for a big day there. But more importantly, Bills, Patriots for a really, it's getting early late here for both teams. So we have on first Chris Price, host of the Patriots Report on Believe, Boston Globe writer. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, what a, I guess, wild game from the start for me. I mean, if you look at it on paper, there's a lot of things to go through, DVOA metrics. There's a lot of advanced statistics that point to this being a really interesting game, Chris. And I wanted to, I guess, ask you first, and I like to ask all the guests, if you wouldn't mind recapping your opinion and your thoughts of the Patriots season to get to date, and kind of why are they in the situation they're in today, and kind of bring us up to speed here as we hit December 1st here soon.
I think one of the great things about covering this team on a regular basis is they're never boring. There's always something to write about. There's always some sort of drama, whether it was the Mac Jones versus Bailey Zappi drama earlier this year, or, play action versus no play action, or, using each and every game and drive to, as a referendum on Matt Patricia's play calling abilities. There's always something with this team. Even with the loss last week, they've certainly appeared to be heading in a more positive direction. I'll say that. The loss to the Vikings, I think, caught some of us by surprise on a number of levels, including the fact that, first of all, the Patriots very rarely get beaten when it comes to special teams. They're one of the better special teams in the league on a regular basis. And to give up a kick return and then to commit the really horrible running into the punter penalty at the worst possible time, I think that threw some of us. The other thing that honestly threw a lot of us too is Mac Jones threw for a career high in terms of yardage, and so that is available. And I know that it's a week-to-week thing and a scheme-to-scheme thing, but we really haven't seen a lot of that from Mac over the course of his career when you're talking about that level of offensive explosion and ability to go toe-to-toe with another team in a shootout. So I guess if I had to kind of sum it up a little bit to this point in the season, it's been a bit of an up-and-down ride for this team. And I think, I'm to go cross my fingers here, I think they're headed in the right direction as they come into really their biggest game of the season.
And that's an interesting point. From an outsider point of view, it feels like it has been a roller coaster season for New England. You had all the offseason talk about this looking like the worst offense anyone has ever seen up in New England. A lot of talk, rumors, stuff like that from practice. But now they've won 5 out of 7. Important game, obviously, coming up against Buffalo, where Patriots get a win. They're within one game potentially of the AFC East lead. Is the vibe in New England that this is a team that is on the right, that is correcting their wrongs and on the right path heading towards the end of the season? Or is there some fear factor that if they lose to Buffalo, it could spiral in the wrong direction at the end?
I think right now there's probably a little bit more of the latter than the former, although I'll say it's 51 to 49%. There's a lot riding on this game for the New England Patriots. Honestly, when you look at where they are in their schedule the rest of the way, they win this thing. They find a way to beat the Bills. They go to 7-5, and then they go out west, and they have 2 very winnable games against the Raiders and the Cardinals. Then you could start to see a path to 10 wins, 11 wins, and a possible playoff spot. I will say this, that the defense needs to continue to play like they've played, at least right up to the Minnesota game. They were exposed a little bit, I think, in the Minnesota game. and you need to get a better performance on special teams than you got last week. This team is going to go as far as the defense and the special teams can take them. I think offensively, it begins and ends with Rondre Stevenson, who's had a very, very good year. But he is really their primary offensive option. Stevenson and Jacoby Myers are their two best options when you're talking about the offensive side of the ball. So I guess ultimately to answer your question, there's a lot riding on this game. And I think in a lot of ways, this game is going to end up determining how the Patriots, the path for the Patriots the rest of the regular season. This game is a pivot game in a lot of ways. If they win, there's a path to the playoffs. If they lose, I think there's an awful lot of uncertainty surrounding this team over the last month of the season.
I think what's interesting to me is you mentioned Ramondre Stevenson and his ascent to the running back one position and really being provided the opportunity to dominate at times. Now, Damian Harris looked like he was on crutches from our understanding. Mm-hmm. Is that, I guess I want to stay there for a second. Is he officially out? Do you expect that to be a big hit? What will the Patriots look like now that they have to go to maybe some of their younger backs, the rookies, as their backup to Stevenson?
They're not going to any of their backups. It's Stevenson or bust at this point for them. They do have two young guys on the roster in Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong. But this game, their fortunes on the offensive side of the ball are going to rise and fall with Stevenson, really. He's done very, very well. I think he's fascinating for me because the Patriots this year don't have that James White, Kevin Falk, Shane Vereen type of third down back. James White retired right before the start of the regular season. Stevenson has not only filled the primary role, the between the tackles guy, but he's also caught 50 passes through 11 games. And so when you look at the total package, what he brings to the field, got a very unique skill set when you're talking about, comparing him to Patriots running backs of the past. So, yeah, look, this thing is going to work if Stevenson works. If Stevenson ends up rushing 25 times for 110 yards and catches 5 passes, things are going to be okay. But look, if Stevenson gets injured or is ineffective or there's a problem, run blocking along the offensive line, the Patriots aren't going to have much of a chance.
What type of strategy offensively do you think the Patriots will come into this game? Obviously, running the ball is going to be crucial. It seemed like last year after the Monday night game in Buffalo, it really kind of changed the Bills' offense at the end of the season. They realized we have to find a way to stop the run. We can't just rely on Josh Allen being our hero. And in late December and then in January, the Bills found their run game, and they practically became unstoppable come playoff time outside of the 13 seconds. Now, with a game like New England, is that going to be the strategy where New England just tries to keep attacking on the ground and keep that clock burning? Are they going to open it up a little bit for Mac Jones, especially with Josh Allen not being 100%? Is this a game where Belichick maybe thinks he can keep toe-to-toe with the Bills maybe a little bit more offensively than they would if Josh was 100%?
I think they showed an awful lot last week when it came to possibly opening things up and throwing the ball downfield. Hunter Henry got more involved in the offense last week than he had been all year. And I think part of that was scheme and comfort level, but I think primarily this is a team that's going to be focused on the short and intermediate passes, as well as getting the running game going and really keeping Josh Allen off the field. The old joke around New England used to be, the best way to beat Tom Brady is to keep Tom Brady off the field. And I think a lot of the same philosophy here is at play when you're talking about Josh Allen in the way New England relates to him. I think that, last December's game wasn't a fluke. I'm not saying that they're going to do the same thing this week, but they're going to run the ball. They're going to have to run the ball. They're going to have to run the ball consistently if they're going to want a chance to beat Buffalo. I think they're going to take some shots downfield. I think Devontae Parker has looked well when he's been called upon. Nelson Aguilar had a good game last week, but I think by and large, you're going to see the short stuff. You're going to see the intermediate stuff. Jacoby Myers is going to play, and I think he's become one of Mac Jones's favorite targets because he is so reliable in those short and intermediate routes. So if I had to guess at this point, you're looking at a New England offense that's going to take things relatively slow and steady. They're going to take some shots downfield when it's there, but I think relatively they're going to be more inclined to kind of slow things down a little bit.
And here's a good question by Roy, and actually one that was on my notes I wanted to get to. The high-priced tight ends from last year. I know Henry got going last week, and then the catch-not-catch situation. Looking at that from an outsider's perspective, looked like a catch to me. I would have preferred that to be a touchdown than not, because that opens up Pandora's box again, and we don't want to go there. And we've seen that and Bills being an offensive team that throws the ball a lot. I'd prefer not to get into this catch, no catch situation. But as we stay on the tight ends, what's their inability to utilize those seemingly designated by Bill Belichick as high-end free agents for the organization? Why have they been slow to get them going in the offense when, they've been paid? I mean, I'm sure you talked about a lot in New England about the cap hit they represent.
The other thing, too, when you talk about the history of tight ends in New England, I mean, really, in a lot of ways, the Patriots, I don't want to say invented the two tight end offense, but they certainly popularized it 10, 15 years ago with Gronkowski and Hernandez and allowing, kind of deploying them in certain ways. I think a lot of people have been confused by it. I think, first of all, when you look at Hunter Henry's numbers, I think Hunter Henry did very well for working with a rookie quarterback last year. I think we need to kind of readjust the expectations. Not everyone is going to be Rob Gronkowski and Tom Brady, and then no one's going to be able to replicate that. I think that being said, Hunter Henry did put up some good numbers. Jonnu Smith is a little bit more of a puzzle. I know he's had some injury issues. They've asked him maybe to do some things that he necessarily wasn't comfortable with all the time, or wasn't particularly, they didn't necessarily play to his strengths 100% of the time. So I think that was a bit more of a challenge. I think when he's gotten the ball, I think he has done relatively well, but it's a matter of just finding ways to maximize his strengths within that New England offense.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good note from the tight end situation as they take up $23 million on the cap. I mean, it's a pretty big number. That's quarterback number. So that's really interesting to kind of see that develop out over the last 12 months plus from that position group. And as it looks like the Bills are just coming off a Vikings game themselves and in a similar game that the Patriots just played in, higher scoring, crazy plays, calls, no calls. It was pretty similar in a lot of ways, back and forth between the Bills, Vikings, Patriots, Vikings, and in a primetime affair there as well. What are you looking forward to? Like, one thing that the Packers tried, and they kind of got a little bit popular, where let's try to run on the Bills, even if we're losing, if we're down 10, if we're down 14, it's better to run it and maybe get points out of it that way than it is to speed up the game, or try to go out with our passing offense. Now, Von Miller himself asked Aaron Rodgers, like, hey, why aren't you guys throwing the ball? Like, we don't think you're going to win like this. And I'm going to tell you that from Von Miller's mouth himself. By the way, Von Miller just said now on his podcast, he expects to play next week against the Jets, just coming out just now. So we'll see how true that is, but he's a pretty straight shooter. So we'll see if, as that story develops just now on his own podcast, saying that he expects to play against the Jets in 10 days following the Patriots game. So that's an interesting note there from Von himself. But staying on topic, what do you think? Like, do you personally think running the ball is the way to win? I liked what I saw out of Mac Jones. Yeah. And that makes me more nervous looking at it from a Bills perspective than only Stevenson winning the game. The Bills have been really good against Dalvin Cook. They were really good against earlier this year against Derrick Henry. They were great last week against Jamal Williams. And they were amazing against Nick Chubb. So the Bills will stop the run. Yes, they've had a few gaffes in there at times, but do you want to see the offense continue to stay open up? Because as a Bills fan, I'm looking at this like, hey, I want them to run the ball. So what is your perspective on if they should continue that trend and to continue Mac Jones taking the offense specifically on his shoulders?
I think it all depends on how they start. This team it's been so inconsistent out of the gate, but when they've played well, they've had good starts. They've had early starts. They've scored, not in the first quarter, but they put up points on the board and they've been able to control the tempo of the game. And I think a lot of that is going to, whether or not, if they're going to run a lot, they're going to have to be able to control the game early. And I think that's key. If they could keep it manageable, if they could stay within one score, if they could, if they go into halftime and they're up, or they're only down 3, or they're only down 7, I think that's more manageable. They're going to have to open it up if they get down in the second half. And I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but it's underscored here when you talk about this game and this game plan. The Patriots cannot allow this game to get away from them. They are not going to beat Buffalo in a shootout, whether in Buffalo or New England. They want to keep this game relatively close. They're not built to win in the 30s. They're built to win more in the teens and the 20s, the way they're currently constructed. That doesn't necessarily mean Mac is not going to take shots down the field, but it has to come within the overall context of the game plan. The other thing, too, that I think is absolutely vital for New England, they have to get special teams magic. They have to get a big return. They have to get a blocked punt. They have to get another great performance from Nick Folk. Nick Folk is one of probably their 3 or 4 most important players on this team this year. We did a Twitter poll the other day, and the MVPs of the team: Stevenson, Judon, and Nick Folk. Those are the 3 names that people bring up the most because Nick Folk has done such a tremendous job this year. So look, they're going to have to get something out of that special teams unit again, whether it's a big return from Marcus Jones, whether it's 5 field goals from Nick Folk, a block punt, punt return, whatever the case may be. They're going to have to get that, I think, if they're going to want to compete with the Bills on Thursday.
Something that I find very interesting, the last couple of weeks, and Kev kind of alluded to it, when the Bills were playing Cleveland, the thought process is Nick Chubb's going to run all over them. And it wasn't Nick Chubb. It ended up being Jacoby Brissett, who was converting on third and long, consistently making big plays. Ended up throwing for over 300 yards. Last week, there was fear that Williams might light them up on the ground, but it ended up being Jared Goff having a pretty solid game throwing the ball around. It seems like when the Bills are ready for a solid ground attack, they prepare for it well and they can stop it, but they're vulnerable through the air against some people that you'd consider lesser quarterbacks. Now, last year, Mac Jones had a sensational rookie year. We were talking about we were talking to Mark Schofield at one time, and he was joking that people were calling Mac the next Tom Brady, obviously joking around because he was having a good rookie year. But so far with the Patriots offense this year, they're 25th in DVOA. It seems, at least from looking out at the box scores, that Mac Jones has regressed this year overall. Is that the case? And is it a concern that we are late in year 2 of Mac Jones and we're talking that they have to run the ball instead of maybe opening things up a little bit more? Or is that more just a product of you're going up against Josh Allen and you just want to keep the ball out of his hands as much as possible?
I think there's a little bit of that. I also think, too, that when you specifically, look at, if we had this conversation before last Thursday, I think I would have put a lot of stock in that. But the way he bounced back against Minnesota on the road, having arguably his finest game in New England, his finest game of the year, and then his finest game in New England, I think he has kind of turned things around a little bit. Now, it's all about, obviously, as you guys know, it's all about stacking success and being able to build on that and being able to put another consistent performance together like he did last week against the Vikings. So I think part of it is keeping the ball out of the hands of Josh Allen. I also think part of it, though, is playing to your strengths. And the running game is the strength of this team. And I think Mac recognized that. I hope Matt and Matt Patricia recognize that as well. And so, again, I don't think we're looking at a situation where Mac is going to open it up and pull a Dan Fouts and throw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. I think he's going to look downfield when the plays are there to be made, or at least to kind of test that defense. But I think this is going to be more of a game where the Patriots are playing more of a controlled game on offense.
Now, switching to the other side of the field, the Patriots defense has been fantastic once again. Number 2 in DVOA, 1 spot ahead of the Bills. And early on in Josh Allen's career, Bill Belichick shut him down. Josh Allen would look confused, out of sorts. This is what you expect with Bill Belichick going up against young quarterbacks. But that has not been the case the last 2 times the Bills have played the Patriots, with them not even needing to punt in either of those matchups. Do you expect Bill Belichick to switch things up defensively, or stick to the forcing Josh to try to check down, be patient, and hopefully he gets overly aggressive, makes a bad throw? What do you really expect Belichick to throw at the Bills? Because I was reading how one of the priorities this offseason was to get more athletic linebackers and to try to switch things up to make life more difficult for mobile quarterbacks. Has that been the case so far? And what do you think you'll see on Thursday?
Yeah, I do think, and I think, Mike, one of the things that was interesting, and I agree with you, I think the focus was to try and get younger on the defensive side of the ball. And so one of the things that New England did was they didn't necessarily go out and completely overhaul their linebacker position. What they did was they went out and they got a lot of oversized safeties, and they leaned into that. They went out and they got guys like Jabril Peppers. Kyle Duggar continues to emerge in that defense. They did get more linebackers, and the younger linebackers, guys like Mac Wilson, Raekwon McMillan, who's actually played more special teams than anything else. Josh Uche, those guys have started to emerge more and more. I wouldn't necessarily call them great playmakers, but I will say this, that they've had more of a role this year than they've had over the last couple of years. Duggar in particular, who I think is absolutely vital to what they want to get done defensively. So they did get younger. They did get faster on defense. You have a guy in Matthew Judon who's having a career year, who should be in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. And then you have those veterans also mixed in there very, very nicely as well. You have guys like Dietrich Wise, who's having a very good year. You have Devin McCourty in the back end, who's having a very good year. And you have the emergence of some young cornerbacks, some young defensive backs like Jack Jones, who I think has played well. There was a lot on Jack Jones's plate and Marcus Jones's plate with the departure of J.C. Jackson, and before that, Stephon Gilmore. I think those guys have done everything that could be expected of them. I think they're going to have a huge challenge this week, that being said. But I think that this New England defense, the second half of last week aside, special teams didn't do them a whole lot of favors when it came to, creating good field position. But I think the defense as a whole, when you look at it as a body of work over the course of the 2022 season, I think they played very well.
Yeah, if you look at DVOA, number 2 defense in the league, negative 17.8%. It's a great score, one that definitely could present some challenges. Now, I wanted to ask you about them breaking tendency. Mike kind of alluded to this. Will they break tendency to defend Josh Allen this week? Because we saw the Isaiah McKenzie game against man coverage. They have that ready to deploy. McKenzie came on really great in a similar type of setting against Dan Campbell's Lions last week, in a situation where he's playing man coverage. He's faster than the slot corner. He just happened to be always open. If you want to take away Diggs, go ahead. They still found him late in that game anyways. Do you expect them to break tendency like they didn't do last year? Or do you expect them to – this is Belichick's defense. Based on film I've watched, you've rotated a lot of DBs. You play multiple safeties, multiple corners at times. Do you expect that heavy rotation? Do you expect him to stay with a certain set of DBs? You mentioned Duggar. Do we see more zone, or does he still stay man heavy?
I think there's going to be a lot of rotation, and I think a lot of that is going to be Jonathan Jones. I think Jonathan Jones had a very good year. Look, guys like Jefferson last week. People are getting on Jones for Jefferson. Jefferson's a great. You guys know. I mean, Jefferson's a great wide receiver. He's going to get numbers against everyone. There's no one who's going to be able to shut him down. So I think the goal is to minimize guys like that, minimize those numbers. And I think that's the attitude they're probably going to try and take with Diggs going into this one. So I think that they're going to try and make you fight left-handed. And so if they can, if you can win a fight with one hand tied behind your back, well, good for you. And so I think the focus is going to be in the passing game is going to be on slowing Diggs. But, Josh Allen is a different kind of cat. I mean, you guys know this. I mean, this is a guy, I don't know how many guys the Patriots have tried to slow with that skill set and how successful they've been, I know they've tried a variety of things, again, man zone, whatever the case may be. But again, I think that, the bottom line is it goes back to keeping them off the field, offensively. And you have to play really good complementary football. It sounds like I'm copping out here, but it sounds like, they really do have to play good complementary football. And the margin for New England in this one is really, really slim. They're going to need to get great performances out of their special teamers. They're going to need to get great performance out of their offense, their running game. That all feeds back into the defensive conversation when you're talking about slowing Josh Allen.
And completely right with that. And that's actually, I think, one thing I read from the Patriots press conferences this week was that they need to play elite team football. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of incredible that Josh Allen has had the success against the Patriots. I think I read somewhere that he has had 3 games of 300-plus yards passing and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. And I think since Belichick has been there, only one other quarterback has done that. Well, not one other quarterback, but that's only been done a max of 1 time by the other quarterbacks that have done that. Mm-hmm. And it kind of is remarkable because we all know Josh is great, but we wouldn't put him in the class, I guess, of what Peyton Manning was when he was a Hall of Famer. Josh is obviously ascending, and he is in that elite tier right now, but he's only been at that level for a couple years. And it's kind of incredible that he has found a way to kind of break the New England defense. And I'm just wondering if it's the combination of him being able to run when you try to stop the pass or you try to whatever you target, he has an answer for. That can't happen much to Bill Belichick, where he's going up against a quarterback and the quarterback can virtually respond to whatever he throws at him.
Yeah, it really is not just the ability to run and the having that big arm, but the size plays into it too. And look, Belichick will go back to this. He's gone back to this a million times. Tackling and the very essence of the game is to get the guy on the ground. And Josh Allen's a big guy. He's a tough guy to bring down, and so you have to be in integrity. You have to have gap integrity. You can't have Judon and Wise or edge rushers getting past the quarterback and having that pocket breakdown, because he's going to be able to find those soft spots in the defense. He is a very unique guy. Again, I'm trying to think of a guy, Mike. You bring up Peyton in his prime, but Peyton didn't have that level of mobility. There are guys who he's faced on a one-off basis. I know he had great respect for Ben Roethlisberger, and he's the kind of guy who had that big arm and had that size, but he wasn't that mobile. He wasn't as mobile as Josh Allen is. So, look, he presents a really unique skill set, one that the kind of guy that I don't think the Patriots have faced, certainly not on a regular basis. And now they have to deal with him twice a year. So they had success against him earlier in his career. He's been able to figure things out. And so it's kind of like a pitcher, the second time through the lineup, Belichick has to figure out a way to make more adjustments and throw another curveball at him so he can kind of stay one step ahead or try to stay one step ahead.
Do you think his elbow injury will play a role at all in how Belichick game plans this week? He's obviously getting better. He's played 3 games through it, but watching him the last few weeks, there are throws that Josh Allen is missing. And as Tony Romo said on the broadcast on Thanksgiving, you could hit 9 throws in a row, and then you go to cock your wrist, cock your elbow, and then it just comes out wrong and it's a half second behind. That could be a pick. It could be an overthrow. It could be a throw in the dirt. And it has made an impact in certain Bills drives. Do you think that will play a role at all in how they attack the Bills offense?
I think that where that would come into play, the most likely spot where that would come into play would be with someone, a veteran like Devin McCourty, who's been through this a million times, and he's the guy in the back end. He's the center fielder on that defense. He's the kind of guy who would be aware of an injury or a potential, again, a soft spot in the offense, a place where they could attack. If a play is there to be made, I would count on Devin McCourty diagnosing the situation and eventually finding a way to make that play. We've seen that a couple times over the course of the year. The guy's on the north side of 30. I think he'll go down as one of Bill Belichick's favorite players of all time. And so I would think that if there is a situation that arises like that, if Allen is visibly, bothered by the elbow issue and is off the mark on his throws, I would think that McCourty would be the kind of guy who would be able to diagnose it, would be able to make the play.
Yeah, that's a good note. And to your point about Josh being different, leads the league in yards per carry, 6.9 yards per carry, has as many rushing yards as Jalen Hurts, a guy that you would think would have a boatload more of rushing yards. He does not. They're very similar in rushing statistics. Advanced statistics say Josh Allen's a better runner than him or Lamar Jackson. And really Justin Fields and his crazy rushing year that he's having is the only one ahead of them all. So what's interesting to me is you have that dynamic, and he still has better statistics than Saquon Barkley rushing the ball. So that's really an interesting, if you kind of put it into perspective on his rushing ability while being able to throw the ball, that presents a challenge, especially when he's right, and did log his first set of full practices this week. So that's going to be an interesting thing to follow, to see how much, like Mike mentioned, that elbow is going to be hurting him. One last note I have, I know we only have you for another minute or two, offensive line in and out. I mean, you have a Warrior at the center position. By all accounts, it looked like a pretty bad injury, kind of like Von Miller almost on the other side of the ball. Any worries? You still have a couple players logging limited practices. Is there, and then a do not participate from Wynn. Is that a worry for Thursday, or do you expect some form of full offensive line being a pretty critical game?
Yeah, that's a very real worry in New England. And I think part of it, I think New England is a little bit heartened. I don't know if that's the right word, but with Von Miller, the uncertainty around Von Miller. I think that certainly helps out a beleaguered New England offensive line. One of the things to look for was that Mac made a concerted effort to get the ball out quickly against the Vikings. And I think that was one of the reasons why he at least appeared not to sustain any pressure. I don't think that's the only reason, but I think that was one of the reasons why the Patriots had a little bit more success in the passing game, and he had a career high in terms of passing yardage. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mac has that, clock in his head. Not that he doesn't usually, but specifically when it comes to the Bills, get the ball out, in a relatively fast fashion. Because, we've seen over the course of the year what happens when he doesn't get it out quickly. I think he is cautious to a fault sometimes when it comes to not throwing interceptions. He would rather take the sack than throw the interception or throw it out of bounds or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I think the New England offensive line has been a bit of a concern for him, for folks in New England. But I think they've been ways, at least when it comes to the Minnesota game, they found ways to minimize it.
Great. We have one final question for you here on the Going Deep podcast. We ask all of our guests, and we really appreciate you coming on once again. Chris Price, host of the Patriots Report on Believe, great podcast network over there. They have many podcasts from a lot of different sports and different teams. Boston Globe writer as well. Score prediction. I know it's awkward. I know it's Tuesday. You got to put your hat on for a second. I don't know if you're going to write about it, pod about it. What are you going to put on this game? Do you think New England stays very much alive in this race, or do you think they very much kind of fall in danger zone they obviously have the tiebreaker against the Jets, luckily, but tell me about your score prediction, where you see this thing coming off Thursday night.
Right now, as we sit here, I think Buffalo wins this game, where, Tuesday night, a couple of 48 hours or so ahead of kickoff. I think Buffalo is going to win this thing. I think New England's going to play really well, but I just think, Josh Allen in that offense, they have too many weapons. They really do. And I think New England keeps it close. I think they are competitive, but ultimately I think Buffalo ends up winning this game. I don't think they cover. I think the line's 5.5 right now, but I don't think New England wins this thing. Let's say Buffalo 28, New England 24.
Okay. So medium to almost higher scoring. Chris, we really appreciate you coming on. Great knowledge as always. Thank you for 30 minutes. We hope to get you on again. Maybe another playoff edition. We'll see. I mean, I think that's still in the running, that these teams could see each other. I definitely think some AFC East teams will see each other 3 times this year. Patriots are right in that running to be one of those. And I think we see an AFC East matchup. Will it be Bills Patriots? This week has a lot to say for it. Chris, thank you so much for coming on. I don't know if you want to tell our followers where they can find you and some of the stuff you're working on this week.
Yeah, I'm at C Price Globe on Twitter. That's C Price Globe. You can read my stuff at bostonglobe.com. I also have a new book out. If there are any hockey fans out there, The History of the Hartford Whalers, called Bleeding Green. It's available on Amazon and everywhere you get your books. So go get that for the hockey fan in your life for Christmas.
I'm sure you're familiar. Very big hockey area here. So definitely that seems like a very interesting read. So make sure you go and check it out.
Love those old Adams Division battles between the Whalers and the Sabres.
Yeah, for sure. We hope that we ever saw those again someday. So thank you so much for popping on as always. It's going to be a great game, and we look forward to speaking again. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate your time.
Take care, guys. Talk soon.
Have a good one.
So, Mike, that was action-packed here from our first guest. We have Mark Schofield here coming on very shortly. What's your takeaway from everything that Chris had to say?
Yeah, it's a Patriots team that seems to be playing with a lot of confidence right now. Even though they lost to Minnesota, feels like they found something offensively, at least in the passing game last week with Mac. Obviously, the rushing attack is going to be pivotal to their chances on Thursday Night Football against the Bills. But you're talking about a New England team that has won 5 out of 7 games, and the Bills are going to have to bring their A game. It is not going to be an easy victory on Thursday night.
It's certainly not. And we're going to keep this action-packed Patriots show alive. And we only try to bring the best on here on the Cover One podcast. Now we welcome in Mark Schofield, one of our favorite old friends. He does all of our shows here every year. He does shows with Greg and Aaron. I think that was yesterday, or 2 days ago now. So it's just fantastic to have Mark. Mark, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, gentlemen. It's great to see you again. Kevin, Mike, great to be here. I love Bills Week. It's one of my favorite weeks of the year. We had it 3 times last year, which is fantastic. And I just heard you with Christopher, who's fantastic. We might get it 3 times again this year. Who knows how things shake out. obviously Thursday night will go a long way towards, determining that. But it's great to be here. I hope everybody's doing well. Excited to dive in.
Yeah, excited to have you. Once again, really great to have two different perspectives. Usually, obviously, we have you on, but it's great to hear from Christopher as well to kind of see where they're at from his perspective. And we're going to ask you a different slew of questions, probably a little bit more about Mac, et cetera, here as we get into some more of the game nitty gritty. And I want to start there with Mac Jones. We heard from Christopher earlier. He was able to open up the game a little bit more against Minnesota. If you would have asked him a week ago, he might have said run. But now he's shown a little bit there after that crazy Bailey Zappi benching situation earlier this year. Where do you stand on that situation? Was it the right move early on? I kind of like what I saw from Zappi a little bit, but that's totally an outsider perspective. So where are we at to date as we kind of recap Mac Jones?
Yeah, I mean, this is still Mac Jones's team. I think the Zappi fever needs a little bit of context. It was against the Detroit Lions and the Cleveland Browns. I do think Zappi certainly deserves credit for, good performances in those games. I think he deserves credit for, his first action at Lambeau Field on the road, like staring at Aaron Rodgers, keeping them in that game, getting them to overtime. Now, I know sitting here right now, a close overtime loss to the Green Bay Packers isn't exactly a quality loss here in 2022. That's a team that's struggling. But Zappi had some good performances, but this is Mac Jones's team. Now, I think what's interesting about what we saw Thursday night, and Christopher was completely right about that, I would have thought going in, yeah, you're going to run the football, but they were banged up. Minnesota was in the secondary. So I think they had an idea that, hey, maybe we'll be able to get something going in the passing game. Because I think, look, that's the piece they need to figure out. They need to figure out their identity as a passing offense. What are they? Are they a spread team? Are they going to be more of an RPO team? They've tried to work RPOs into the game plan a little bit more. That's obviously something that Mac Jones did a lot of at Alabama. Are they an under center play action team? We saw some of that on Thursday night. They're still trying to piece together what they are as a passing game. We're after Thanksgiving, though. You should have figured that out by now. And that the fact that they're still trying to piece that together is a bit worrisome. But this is Mac Jones's team, and they're going to sort of sink and swim with him down the stretch. I know that the Zappi conversation has opened up sort of a longer range discussion about what Mac Jones really is, and is he really the guy? But until this season ends, it's his team.
Yeah. Now, one thing I'm interested about Mac Jones is he had a sensational rookie year. And to the point where there were some people across the country that thought the Bills were going to be a one and done and that the Patriots were reclaiming their throne in the AFC East. And maybe that was a little bit of fun and a little premature, but still it was a conversation that existed. This year, the numbers haven't been there for Mac, but I think there's a lot of questions why that is the case. Obviously, the offseason, a lot of talk about who's the offensive coordinator, a lot of rumblings that this is one of the ugliest looking offenses heading into the season. Was this a case where the Patriots tried to throw too much at Mac during the offseason, or tried to switch too much with their offense overall, and then after realizing it firsthand during the month of August in the Miami game, we had to simplify things? And is this the product of now the Patriots going back to a more simpler version of the offense for Mac, or is that just too broad and general of an explanation for what's happened?
No, Mike, I think you're in large part right about that. I think that, and I've talked on this show and some of the other Buffalo shows about the importance of continuity around the quarterback, right? And Buffalo fans, you all know this perhaps better than most, right? Like the continuity around Josh Allen was a part of his development to where he is today. Now, Josh Allen's own work in the offseason on himself, mechanics and all that stuff is obviously another big part of his development and progression. But having continuity in playbook scheme, play caller, it's very important for a young quarterback's development. The fact that, like you laid out, Mike, it's entirely correct. In August, July, training camp, this was supposed to be an outside zone, wide zone, boot action, Kyle Shanahan type of offense. That's what we were being told that this was going to look like. That's what they were running, at the start of training camp. Then the pads went on, and like you said, this is the worst offense I've ever seen. I've seen Pop Warner offenses that are better executed. I don't know what they're doing. And then Darte Scarnecchia, their old offensive line coach who's now retired, sort of teed it up in an article interview he did with Karen Gagurjian at the Boston Herald that basically said, if it's not working, they'll scrap it. And like you said, Mike, week 1 against Miami, they had the second most outside zone, wide zone running plays in the entire NFL. That's gone now. Like they're a inside zone, tight zone, gap, power duo. Like they've moved away from that in the run game. They still run outside zone stuff, but it's not like the core tenet of their offensive foundation that we were told it was going to be. And then in the passing game, they're struggling to sort of find, like I said, that identity, what they are as a passing offense. And I think when you're still moving things around conceptually for a second-year quarterback, that can be a problem. I think when you're now third offense in 3 years, basically Alabama, Josh McDaniels, and now this Matt Patricia system, that's not beneficial to quarterback development. But let's also remember this. Last year was kind of the Mac Jones argument, right? It was he's the pro-ready guy. He's going to come in. He's not going to make a ton of mistakes. He's going to run your offense. He won't make you look bad if you start him right away. Talk to me in year 2. Talk to me in year 3. They're like, what's his ceiling look like? We're seeing year 2 right now, and there have been some ups. The first 2.5 quarters against Baltimore, a lot of what he did against Minnesota, but there have been some downs. You've seen turnovers. You've seen his numbers against pass and pressure this year. 35th in the league out of 37 qualified passers in adjusted completion percentage when pressured this year. He's only ahead of Zach Wilson and Mitchell Trubisky. That's not great company. And he was pretty good against pressure last year. And when you fold that in with some of the offensive line woes, like Christopher just walked you guys through a couple of minutes ago, that's not a good combination. And so they're trying to figure out what they can do in the passing game. I think all the changes conceptually and in play caller and in system haven't been conducive to his development, but there are also things he needs to improve on. There are things that he needs to do better at. Like Christopher said, getting the ball out quicker, like he did against Minnesota to try and neutralize that pressure. It's certainly going to help, but the passing game is a big question. It's been a big question for basically this entire season.
What's very, I guess, numbers that I was looking at here in the pre-show and just kind of going over myself. It's the kind of the offense in general, the offensive total DVOA. I would have thought it would be higher than 25th, negative 9.3%. Personally, I thought they ran the ball a little bit better than those say, but DVOA would disagree with me. Do you agree with that it's been poor overall? I don't, let's throw Mac out for a second. Let's throw Zappy out. Has it been that poor as a whole, where you're down there with, like you mentioned, the company down there with a hurting Rams team, Carolina, Denver? Do you agree, or is there missing something there, some context there?
No, I largely agree with that. I mean, the number I keep coming back to is 38.7%. That's the percentage of their red zone drives that end in touchdowns. That's 31st in the league. They are, again, talking about company, they're just behind the Colts and the Texans, and they're just ahead of the Broncos. Are those offenses you want to be associated with in the year of our Lord 2022? No, no. Not at all. I mean, you're talking about Davis Mills, Sam Ehlinger, whatever they're doing in the Colts, and whatever is happening out in Denver. And they can't finish drives. You look at what happened Thursday night. They had 9, and they had a play that after a reverse where they got kicked out of the red zone. They were at like the plus 22 or something like that. So we'll call it 10 plays in the red zone. They weren't very effective on those. You had breakdowns in protection. You had breakdowns in routes. You had a play where Ramondre Stevenson's flexed outside to the left, runs a curl. Nelson Aguilar runs it out right into him. You got 2 guys in the same area. You had that reverse play I mentioned to Kendrick Bourne that got stopped for a loss of 7. They struggled in the red zone. Yes, they had the Hunter Henry play, but that was ruled an incompletion. And so, even if that went for a touchdown, they'd still be 31st in red zone touchdown percentage. It's not a great place to be. Their average is just, I think, 1.7 points per drive, which is 23rd in the league. Like, they're struggling to finish drives with 6. They're struggling to get into the end zone when they get down to the red zone. And that's been a season-long issue for them. And so are there things that they do well? Yeah. I mean, the running game, now that they've figured that out, that's working for them. I think they've figured out at least an under center play action passing game in the past couple of weeks. You saw some of that against Minnesota on Thursday night. I think they're figuring that piece to it. But they're not built to win shootouts. They're not built to win when they've got to throw it 60 times or something like that. They're built to win rock fights. You can win more rock fights in the NFL this year than the past couple of years because scoring is down. I don't think they're going to find themselves in a rock fight Thursday night.
Yeah, it's ironic that you mentioned the red zone failures of
right
this year, because that's honestly been the Bills' kryptonite for this season. They have not been a good red zone team. overall. Josh Allen, he had a stat, I think, midway into last year that he had never thrown a red zone interception. Well, it's the plague right now. Josh Allen's throwing interceptions left and right to whoever wants to take the ball inside the 20. And what I find interesting is last year, obviously the Bills come into this year, all the Super Bowl hype. But a lot of people forget they were 11-6. And at one point, it looked like it was the Patriots division after winning that Monday Night Football game. And this year, 8-3, but there's still some of those worries. But what you could do to beat the Bills last year was, like you said, run the ball, keep the clock going, and squeak out those low-scoring games. But in recent weeks, when the Bills have played the Browns, when they have played the Lions, two teams that you would have expected to try to implement that strategy, Nick Chubb was nowhere to be seen in the running game. Williams, nowhere to be seen in Detroit. But what did happen was that Jacoby Brissett was converting on 3rd and longs all over the field, hitting Amari Cooper. And then Detroit was hitting Amon St. Brown all over the field. I have this is just me personally. I get the vibe. I think that might be the case a little bit again this week on Thursday Night Football, where everyone expects going in the Patriots to try to repeat what they did on Monday night, obviously crazy conditions last year, and run it all over the Bills. But the Bills expecting that, stopping them early, and then the Patriots actually opening it up and having some success in the passing game. Now, will it be a shootout? I don't think we're going to talk about a 35-32 game, but I actually think the path to a successful night will be Mac Jones spreading the ball out on Thursday night. What do you think about that? Am I way off? Am I crazy? Or is there any logic behind what I'm saying?
I mean, there's certainly some logic around that, particularly that, look, if you're Leslie Frazier, you're going to think what we're all thinking, right? You're going to assume, look, this is going to be a Ramondre Stevenson game. They're going to want to run the football. They're going to want to turn Josh Allen into a spectator. The more time that 17 spends watching this game is the better from New England's perspective. So you want to try to stop the run. That might open up some opportunities in the passing game for the New England Patriots. Now, who are they going to be targeting? I think is the next question off of that. Jacoby Myers has the shoulder. He said he was going to go. I'd expect he's going to go. You know, they're using Tyquan Thornton on some vertical stuff. Do you see a shot play or two downfield maybe early in this game? Try to loosen up that secondary. That's something I'm kind of curious about myself. I think it's going to be a lot of 12, you know, with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry on the field at the same time. They found some things that work, particularly that sort of full house look with both of them in the backfield, some under center play action stuff that they might try to dial up. And so there will probably be, like you said, Mike, some opportunities for Mac Jones to make plays downfield. The question is, can he hit consistently? The question is, can he play a full 4 quarters? Because that Baltimore game, for example, you know, the Minnesota game on Thursday night, it was like 3+ quarters of good football. But then when you need it down the stretch, it's not quite there. Can they put 4 quarters of a passing game together against a team that's not, say, the Zach Wilson Jets or, you know, the Detroit Lions or the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah. And RJ has a really good point, kind of to mimic Mike's point. He has a feeling that the Pats are going to throw all over him. I mean, it's not outlandish for Bills fans to think that because they've been poor. Like if you look at the DVOA, like we were just in, you would, I don't know nationally or even regionally, locally, what you would think, but the Bills defense rushed DVOA 3rd in the league at stopping the run. They've had a couple big runs, one against Dalvin Cook. Other than that, Minnesota did nothing. Chubb's done nothing. Derrick Henry's done nothing. Jamal Williams, their game plan did nothing. There's been a lesser backs that have found a little bit of success, but when the team has a focal running back, that's when the Bills are better against stopping the run. Way better at it this year than you saw in even that win game last year. The Bills did struggle last year, and to Mike's point of the record last year, it was an issue. Their pass DVOA is dipping. It's dropping. It's dropping like dropping a stone in water. It kind of makes sense
when they're going up against a big name running back. That's the easy target to game plan for, which actually opens them up in the secondary. And it is interesting because you have Trey White starting to get a little bit of time. Is he going to play more than 15 snaps this week? None of us really know, but I'm sure he'll see the field a little bit more. But Dane Jackson teams have just been exposing him in recent weeks. Kyer Elam has missed some time recently. It's a Bills secondary that over the last few years, you don't even question because of the safety play, because of Trey White. But with Micah Hyde out of the lineup, with Trey just sparingly playing, it's weird to say it, but it is an area of weakness at times, especially when they're playing minus one of their starting linebackers in Tremaine Edmonds or Matt Milano, who I believe both will be in this game on Thursday, if what I'm reading is correct. But that's an area the Bills desperately needed Tremaine Edmonds back, because when they've been missing Milano or Edmonds, doesn't matter who, they have been getting exposed. A completely different defense when those two are on the field healthy compared to when they're off the field. And you can almost single-handedly put that Minnesota loss on Tremaine getting hurt right at the end of the first half. Second half, defense couldn't stop anything. First half, they were playing dominant. So I know linebackers kind of considered the running back of the defense as far as important, but in this Bills defense, the amount of field they cover, it'll be huge if the Bills can get Tremaine back on Thursday.
Tremaine covers receivers, Mark. I mean, part of the scheme was he was taking away Adam Thielen. He was taking away Hawkinson for the majority of the game, and you would think he would matter more against the run. And the Bills have saw a drastic decline against the pass. He's been out for 2.5 games. Guess when they've struggled these 2.5 games against the pass. So they will get a bonus getting back pretty much everybody on defense. You know, that's funny to say, minus Von Miller, who I don't know if you heard, he just tweeted himself saying he expects to be back against the Jets next week. We don't know how that's possible. Looked like season ending to being a 1-week injury. We don't know where that gap came from, but that's what he's saying. But look, like Von Miller himself, I mentioned this to Christopher, said to Aaron Rodgers, like, you guys can run the ball all you want. We're going to stay nickel. Like we expect you to pass. If we get up on you, we don't care if you run the ball. If you want to keep 17 off the field, when 17 goes on the field, we're going to score. So like what's interesting to me about that is, do you anticipate Mac Jones being able to match that kind of energy on a Thursday night football game? And I'm not convinced yet, maybe because it's the Patriots that they come out of nickel. I think you might see them in nickel a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and Christopher sort of talked about this too earlier, that they could score to stay close. I don't know if they could score enough to win. And that's sort of the tension in New England right now with where this team is. You know, you saw it on Thursday night against Minnesota. They're able to score enough to stay in that game. But when it comes down to getting that next touchdown, getting that extra touchdown, finishing drives with 7, that's where they've sort of struggled. And I think that's going to be another issue for them on Thursday night. Like, I think they'll keep this close. I know we're going to do predictions here in a couple minutes. I think they can keep this game close, but I just don't think they have enough offensively to say win and put up enough points to beat Josh Allen. You know, it might come down to, can they manufacture a special teams play? Can they manufacture a turnover or something like that? But if it's a clean turnover-free type of game, I don't think there's a scenario where New England and Mac Jones are going to be able to like outscore Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and company.
Turnovers are definitely in play, though. I mean,
yeah,
we kind of had this discussion on our show last week. Normally when the Bills lose, it's because they found a way to defeat themselves.
Right.
And I know that kind of seems a little bit condescending to opponents and not giving them enough respect, but I feel like it was probably very similar to the Patriots run. When they lost games, it was probably something that they did more so than their opponents. And you look at the 3 losses this year. They had a game against Miami where they had a 4th and goal with the chance to win it at the end, couldn't convert, even forced a safety after that and couldn't score on the ensuing final possession of the game. Had a chance to win against the Jets, couldn't score in the end. And then Minnesota blowing a 17-point lead where they get the 4th down stop, but still fumble a QB sneak and then throw a late interception. Josh Allen has been great this year, but he is one thing that he hasn't been doing well with is protecting the ball at times.
Right.
And each week we're now asking, do opposing teams have the player that can make that pivotal play? Cleveland didn't. Detroit almost did. The Lions made plays that put the Bills in a tough situation late. And this Patriots defense, DVOA, ranked number 2. I don't know if that was a surprise to you at all this year. Obviously, Belichick is one of the greatest defensive minds in football, but with the guys that they've lost over the years to still be at this elite level, how do you think they're going to attack Josh Allen and the Bills? Will they change anything up from the last 2 games where the Bills didn't punt? And you expect them to have more answers than what they have had in the past outside of the Monday night game, which we all know was just a complete ridiculous situation.
Right. And it's interesting what they've done this year defensively, because we're living in, and I know you guys have talked about this a lot, the too high world, right? Where everybody's playing cover 2, cover 4, keeping both safeties deep. They've gone back to a single high world. They've been predominantly cover 1, cover 3 this year. Now, that was a little bit different Thursday night. You saw a little bit more zone from them. You saw a little bit more too high from them. I don't know if that was a Justin Jefferson specific thing, or if that's going to be what we're going to see from them again on Thursday night, because they're trying to keep, containment over Stephon Diggs. I think you probably see more zone, generally speaking, because I'm certainly of the mindset that you want to keep eyes on 17. You don't want to turn your back to him. 3rd and 7 becomes 1st and 10 if he has an opportunity to pull it down and make a play with his legs, because he's just incredible at everything at the quarterback position. The one thing I am sort of curious about Stephon Diggs specifically, if they go man, who gets that assignment? Is it Jonathan Jones? We've seen Jonathan Jones when they went man with Justin Jefferson, it was Jonathan Jones. When Tyreek Hill was in Kansas City, or even the week 1 in Miami, it was Jonathan Jones. Is it Jonathan Jones against Stephon Diggs? Is it Jalen Mills with safety help against Stephon Diggs? Is it somebody else? That's something I'm curious about when they do go man coverage in certain situations. Who's going to get the Stephon Diggs assignment? With respect to Devin McCourty, if there's a turnover to be had, he's probably the guy to watch there. And the other thing that they've done really well is get pressure with 4. You look at their pressure numbers with 4, top 5 in the league behind the Cowboys and the Jets in terms of pressure percentage when they rush 4. They've got a really good sub package where they kick Dietrich Wise inside, Uche and Matthew Judon off the edges. They really like that look. They'll go to it in sub package situations. I'd expect to see a decent amount of that. But let's not forget, the DVO numbers are great, the DVOA numbers. Their 5 most recent wins are Zach Wilson twice, Sam Ehlinger, Jared Goff, Jacoby Brissett. You have to give those numbers and what they've done defensively a little bit of context. They've got losses to Kirk Cousins, losses to Justin Fields, losses to Aaron Rodgers this year. They've struggled at times too.
That's a really big no, and that's at times what we are pointing to with other teams in the division. Like you look at the Jets and some of their wins, even Miami's recent stretch, Houston, etc.
Right,
hasn't been.
That's spot on with Miami. Tua's performances against top 10 DVOA teams on defense are completely different than his against the bottom feeders. So that definitely does play a role. Whether you want to, how much credit you want to give to it, we'll see. But that's one of those things where schedule plays a role. I want to give New England the credit. I think when you have the track record that Bill Belichick has, you're always going to give him the benefit of the doubt compared to other coaches that might not have the same past. But I guess we will see on Thursday night.
Do you expect him to break tendency, like out of what Bill Belichick does? You saw the Isaiah McKenzie game, we like to call it here. And give him man looks, or do you expect that zone to stay?
It's so weird, because if you had asked me that question, Kevin, say a week ago, I would have said no. They've played so much single high, they played so much man this year. I'd imagine that's where they're going to want to live. Maybe it's not what I would do, but look, Bill Belichick has forgotten more about football than I will ever know. So if that's what he wants to do with the personnel he has, then great. But then you see that game against Jefferson, and you can't help but wonder, hey, week before they played Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills and Stephon Diggs, and what we've seen them do against Patriots man coverage looks, maybe this was sort of a tune-up to, hey, let's get ready. Let's run some of this stuff. Yes, it should help us against Justin Jefferson tonight, but it might also help us get ready for what we're going to see next week. And so, like I said, if you had asked me this question a week ago, I would have said, no. Single high, 1, 3, that's where they want to be. The change up, the tendency breakers, like you sort of described them last week, make me think we might see some more this week.
Do you think that they were good at it against the Vikings? What's your opinion on how they played out of tendency?
They weren't perfect. Let's put it that way. Justin Jefferson still made plays. That passing game still made plays. He's a very good receiver. Stephon Diggs is a great receiver. And so, the main thing I think when you're going up against Josh Allen is he's at the point of his career where you have to do some different things. You have to show him some different looks. You have to show Stephon Diggs some different looks. You can't just spot drop on 30 passing downs and say, look, we're going to drop into country cover 3. We'll have it figured out. You got to change some things up. So even if they're breaking tendency on 10 snaps, I think that's going to matter. So I think that they weren't great at it. Obviously, they lost. The offense had something to do with that as well. But now they've got a week to sort of, if that's the direction they want to go, iron that stuff out before Thursday night.
That's an interesting point of how they did calling it against the Vikings. An interesting note going into multiple Bills matchups down the stretch. That is interesting to get it practiced. Hopefully, maybe sneak a win against the Vikings. It was a close game. Catch, no catch. I said to Christopher, I thought it was a catch. I don't want to live in
America's favorite games. What is a catch? We don't know.
I don't want to live in a world where they're still limiting being in a pass offense, limiting a pass offense. I don't want to live in that world where I want late in the year when Stephon Diggs makes that same play. I'd prefer that to be a catch.
Exactly.
Then somehow randomly tip the ground like a little bit. I think he had control of that. That's a catch in my world, but we can't live there, Mark. We could talk rules all day. There's missed calls all over the field. Bills Vikings officiating game, back to the Vikings, is one of the worst officiating games I've ever seen in professional, and that's both ways. Bill had 12 men on the field.
12 men on the field. Hey, apparently that's a thing right now because you saw that Seahawks player going onto the field.
Hey, just do it. They won't catch you half the time.
That wasn't caught there live in the huddle, in lineup, in review. I don't know. I'm not really sure what to tell you. Then, Knox gets mugged in the end zone. They don't call that. You're just guessing at this point what's going to be a game, what's not. Mark, favorite part of the show, it's score predictions. Got to listen to you a little bit on Aaron and Greg's show, kind of know where you might go with this. But I always have to ask you, and you're right, we might get 3 matchups like we were talking with Christopher. I think it's very likely you have an AFC East battle in the playoffs, 100%. Who will it be? Will it be the Jets sneaking in there? Will it be Dolphins, Bills? Will it be Patriots, Dolphins? I do think you see 3 AFC East teams for sure. I'm pretty convinced of that. So we might see a 3 times, but game 1, pretty important game for New England to stay in this thing. Losing here puts them in a big hole. Winning it puts them right in there. So what are you thinking, and what's going to happen? Is weather okay there in Boston, by the way?
It's going to be last we looked, it was like, upper 40s.
All right, baby.
Maybe slight breeze, but like for Thanksgiving in New England, you take that. That's right, Kevin. That's shorts weather. My heart tells me that Belichick finds a way to pull this out, but my head's kind of saying, like I said with Greg and Aaron, 27-21 Buffalo. Like I said, I think New England could score enough to keep this close. I just don't think that with what we've seen from this team, this offense down in the red zone this season, they're going to have enough to get that one more touchdown that they need. They might have to settle for field goals on 1 or 2 drives when they could have had touchdowns, or, something like that plays out. I think it's a close game, relatively speaking, a 1-score game, but I think Buffalo 27-21.
Okay, interesting. And lastly, anything on the injury front? We know Harris is out. Bills fans
Harris is out. Myers, I think he's like he said, he's going to go. He's got the shoulder. Jalen Mills with a groin is going to be something to watch. Barmore, he's had a lower body, a knee that's, going to be an issue. I don't know if he's going to go. Wynn was a DNP today on Tuesday. I'd be stunned if he's going to go. I think you're going to see, somebody else to tackle there. And so, the one to watch for me is kind of Myers. How is he going to look with that shoulder injury? And then, the Mills and the groin, what's his assignment going to be if he goes? Is he going to be limited, which might lead them to more of the zone coverage that we talked about? Because, are you going to take Jalen Mills and put him on Stephon Diggs with safety help? Or are you going to take Jalen Mills and put him on, say, McKenzie or a situation like that? So, his groin might be an issue to watch over the next couple of days.
Does Bill in his later years, is he more conservative or aggressive with like questionable players? Does he play them, limit them? What does he usually do?
He seems to be more conservative with a lot of things, players, 4th down decisions, things like that. He's got, it's Belichick zigging while everybody zags. I mean, everybody's going for it on 4th down. He's punting. Like, it's been strange to watch, but
he's deferring in overtime. I actually, when he first did that, I like that he deferred on in overtime, and I'm like, that's interesting. I like that because you get the ball potentially with 4 downs. You get the ball to kick field goal. 4 down offense is hard to stop. I don't hate that, but they went and scored a touchdown, so no one does it. Right. I actually like that decision. Really, that's just a side note. For like you mentioned, he zigs and he zags. Mark, I saw your recent SB Nation stuff. I saw you writing about soccer, by the way.
Soccer, F1. They let me write about all sorts of stuff, Kevin. It's kind of crazy over there.
Yeah, as a U.S. men's national team supporter.
Big W.
Great game. What do you have on the fold? What are you working on? I mean, gosh, not just a Thursday night game. I mean, are you covering the entire cup?
Entire cup. I'll have the games covered tomorrow. We'll obviously have Saturday's match with the Netherlands. We'll have that covered as well. Like I said, we're building out some F1 coverage. I've got a lot of off-season F1 stuff that I'm going to be doing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're letting me go wild, Kevin.
Are you a Hamilton guy? Are you Verstappen? What?
I have decided I'm a Haas guy.
Okay.
So I am going to ride with the American team with Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg, who's come back as they sort of let Mick Schumacher go. So it's kind of like, I thought about, hey, I'll ride with Hamilton and Mercedes, or I thought about Ferrari for a while, but I'm like, I can't pick one of the good teams. Give me the underdog, like American team that's like fighting for 8th and 10th place every race. So
that's who I'm like best friends with Josh Allen. So I think Bills fans now like Danny Ricciardo.
Yeah, and he's back at Red Bull for next season as their third driver. And I actually wrote about that when he went to see Josh Allen play, and he had the big Josh Allen head cardboard.
I guess Josh said if they win this year or in any year, he's going to do a shoey. So
yeah,
there you go. That's cool that the Bills have had that cross. So yeah, Danny Ricciardo was like there with his sign, like sign, like so.
Play catch with him on the field pregame and everything.
Yeah, like he was a little kid fan. So that was interesting to see F1 pop its head up a little bit. It's interesting to see the World Cup pop its head up a little bit as well. US makes a splash, doing what they needed to do in a big game to show that, like, hey, we're still top 15, 16, like technically in the world. So interesting to see if Christian Pulisic does go Saturday. So that's just
listed as day to day. Is already home. We met the team at the hotel. So
he said he was going to play. Yep. We'll see if Greg Berhalter comes up with something witty against a game where I don't think it's a foregone conclusion what happens in that one on Saturday at all. So. Mark, what else are you working on? What are you working on New England? So are you working on I was reading your feed and I was like, wow, he's writing about everything. So what do you got going on this week?
So I'll have this game covered. I'll probably do a couple of pieces during and after the game. I'll probably have something Friday up on how this one turns out. But yeah, like I said, they let me write about everything, man. It's kind of fun.
Awesome. Well, I know we've had you on for a few years. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. Probably going to ask you to come back in a couple of weeks, end of the year, January, actually. So it's about a month away. And then still think there's that outside hope that maybe these teams match up for game 3.
If there's a game 3, I'll be here.
All right, Mark. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your knowledge as always. One of the best quarterback analysis I think I can find here on the site. So thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a great night. Enjoy the game.
See you soon. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Woo, Mike. I don't even know how to break down all that knowledge we got from Mark. We got from Christopher. That's more than I can handle. We got F1 talk there for a minute. We got some soccer talk there for a minute.
We got the big shots on the show today.
Yeah, and we didn't even get into big hoops. We didn't even get into mid-major basketball. Yeah, that's for a different show.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, I know.
We've been talking too much about that outside of the show, getting tense between you and me. Everybody thinks that we get tense about the Bills talk. It's not the Bills talk.
No, not the Bills talk.
It's the college basketball talk that we get at it. So
yeah. Well, Mike's pro St. Bonaventure, so we have a pro St. Bonaventure unit and I'm negative to St. Bonaventure, as we both kind of root for UB basketball and their rise and fall, and Mike also roots for Ohio basketball. So there's many things to talk about there for us on the mid-major front. UB Bonas do match up here shortly, Mike. Before that UB Bonna game, even before that U.S. Netherlands game, we have a Thursday night football game, and we need to know what you're thinking in this game. And yeah, we really appreciate Mark from coming on here. Yeah, Mark is a fantastic guest every year. He breaks it down for us in every sense of the world. What Patriots are facing right now? I forgot to ask you though, what is your opinion on Von saying next week? What are you thinking about that?
I think that might be a little premature. Von can have that optimism. That doesn't mean the team doctors are going to share it.
That means he's getting that from somebody, doctor.
I don't think the Jets game is going to be the game.
Okay.
I think the
Dolphins?
Miami game will.
Okay. I'll take that.
I'll take the Miami game. I don't think they need him against the Jets to win that. The Miami game, different story. Going against Tua, you're going to need to get a pass rush, especially when you have guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So I'm hoping Von takes the necessary time, gets the necessary rest, and then he's ready to go. If he's good for the Jets game, tremendous. But I'm not going to count on that at this point. I feel like the Bills team doctors are typically going to play the safer side.
Even in a limited role, Mike, like a closer role of 20 snaps, something like that. You
I mean, I guess if they clear him, then I would be okay with it. I'm not the team doctor. I just want them to make sure that they're not putting him on the field prematurely. But if they clear him, then he has the go ahead. I'm all for it. It's going to be interesting though. What Von Miller are we going to see when he is back on the field? Presumably wearing a brace. He acknowledged today that there is issues. It's not all good news. That he believes he can play through it, but basically reading up on the type of injury he has, it sounds like once the Bills season is officially over, he's going to go for the full repair, which is going to be a long recovery, but should be back in time for the start of next year, which is the good news.
Like, we have to talk real quickly too about, because obviously we do one show a week here. We actually really appreciate everybody tuning in to the Going Deep podcast here on the Cover One Podcast Network. Great guest as always, Mark Schofield. Let's not forget to shout out as well Christopher from the Boston Globe, from the Believe Network as well. Amazing guest too, really good. So give him a follow. I thought he gave some really great updates and news as well coming out of Boston. So we were really blessed to have a really good Patriots report. But I got to ask you, there's been a little more talk lately as Odell Beckham Jr. is looking to make his decision. I don't know if we'll talk again before that. Probably close up against when he actually literally has to sign finally.
Bills looks like there's going to be a visit this week.
Yeah, one of 3 teams. So I didn't know that they'd actually make the final 3. No, I don't think the Giants can be realistic, Mike. They're just not realistic.
I don't think have a chance. Okay. You don't go back to New York to be on a wild card 3rd, maybe 4th place NFC East team because with Washington now getting it going, there is no guarantees that Giants team is even going to be the top 3 in their own division. And when you look at the luck factors, the Giants have been actually winning more than what they probably should be at this point in the season. I would cross the Giants out. But you even compare Buffalo to Dallas. Dallas is most likely going to be a wild card team. I understand they have a great quarterback. They have a good offense, good climate,
go on the road.
History. But Philly is looking pretty dominant right now. I still think Buffalo has a chance at him. I'm not going to say they're the favorites. I think Dallas is the favorites, and I would have said that from the point that they started really being part of the discussion just because of all the things that OBJ was saying what was important to him. It seemed to line up with Dallas pretty well. I do wonder, have we been misled by the national media in recent weeks about where OBJ's head is really at in terms of this? Because I find it interesting that for about 2.5 months, we heard Von Miller saying he's coming to Buffalo, he's coming to Buffalo, coming to Buffalo. Then Dallas enters the discussion. The Giants enter the discussion. And it seems like the big market media got excited about the possibility of him returning to his former team or going to America's team. And I feel like they kind of just fed into it. You would hear reports by Ian Rappaport discussing the two, acting like Buffalo was out of it. And then when they announced the 3 visits, there are the Bills. And it's like, why haven't we been part of the discussion? Why has that not been part of the conversation? It's been talked like the Bills have been out of it. Well, obviously that's not the case. I think in the end, Jerry Jones is going to do whatever it takes to get him.
He's got the cap space, Mike. He can go extra years, $7 million against the cap.
Another question. Now there's some people rumbling, is Jamison Crowder going to be able to come back at the end of the season for the Bills? Is he going to be able to play? That's another significant
what about John Brown, a guy that we did sign recently, haven't had a show since. John Brown's in the fold, said he's ready to go. Tanner Gentry's luckily out of practice squad elevations. He already used his 3, so that leaves the Bills. They will play 5 receivers, sometimes even 6, but they will play 5 right now. They need to elevate somebody. Do they go to John Brown as early as 2 days from now? I think it's pretty possible you could see a package of John Brown plays.
And this would have to be a work him out situation, correct? He said he's clear to go. making a decision in the upcoming.
Is that offensive? I don't know the visit game. Is that offensive to be like, yo, dude, like we want to sign you, but you want to go run some 40s?
If the Bills are bringing him in, they're bringing him in to try to sign him. This is not
paying money. Yeah.
We're past the whole, oh, he's just doing his joy visits and having fun, going to different places. It's now down to the Giants, Bills, and Cowboys, and one of them is going to be signing OBJ, presumably in the next week and a half. At this point, you almost have to sign him in the next week or 2 weeks, because next thing you know, you're in mid-December, and what's the point after that? So we'll see. The John Brown signing, I do see some comments about that. He might play in a few games. I don't want people to have their expectations be unreasonable. We're talking about a guy that hasn't played in the NFL all season, barely played last season. The talk before he was out of the league was that he had lost a step. I don't want us to think John Brown is going to be the same guy we had when he had a 1,000-yard season with Cole Beasley in 2019. I like the nostalgia, but he's more of a depth piece than anything else, an emergency need, because you can't call up Gentry. I'm hoping the Bills are able to add someone else, whether that be Crowder being healthy enough to return or OBJ in the picture.
I want to talk about this real quick, the money side of it. Yes, that's where the Cowboys are going to have the leg up on probably a majority of teams at this team. I think that the Rams being bad and the Packers being bad helped the Bills here. Those were two top contenders that are out. Like Mike said, I don't know that the Giants are much of a contender. I can't really see them seriously being a road late 6-7 ranked overall team in the NFC playoffs. I can't see him signing. What I think the Bills could do when it comes to money, you need to go future years, whether those are real years, whether those are void years, whether they're semi-real years. The Bills will need to go multiple years. And will the Bills be what's serious is if they get him in for a workout, Mike, will they go 2 or 3 years to lock up a receiver too?
Would you go 3 years? I would. Yes. I would be fine with that.
3 years. 3 years, we come to agreement on money. The cap goes up. I would go 3 years right now with a boost of OBJ, some type of guaranteed money for him up front, but then some type of out clause for the Bills if something goes wrong on or off the field needs to be there too. But I do believe 3 years. I think he wants guaranteed money. I think he wants to settle down. And I think what's really interesting is, like you said, do we believe the media who's trying to help his agent generate money? Or do we believe Von Miller, a guy that he actually texts? We'll find out real quickly.
And that's what's going to be interesting too, because I do believe the Dallas hype is legitimate. Now, the question is the media presuming Dallas is the favorite because of the hype that Dallas is putting out there? Jerry Jones talking, the players on the team talking. I did not hear much from the national media when Von Miller was posting on Instagram about OBJ. There was a few comments about it, a few discussions on the networks, but nothing significant. When Jerry Jones and the Cowboys started talking about it, it was all over the place. I feel like that to me is a little confusing because a person of Von Miller's significance, and especially him being a close personal friend to OBJ, I think plays a much larger role than what many have been discussing in this. I thought the New York Giants hype was a little bit odd. There were people that were talking, former coaches of his, former friends and colleagues. The only person that knows what he's going to do is OBJ. Now, the one thing I will say about Dallas is, even though they tend to get a lot of these quality free agents, they don't always pony up. This situation, I think they will, because they're talking the talk, and I don't think Jerry Jones wants to lose the battle for OBJ, especially when he has been outspoken publicly on this. But it's far from a guarantee. If the Bills give a respectable offer to OBJ that puts Dallas in a tough situation, it is not a guarantee that Dallas is going to match or be able to give OBJ what he wants. There's a lot that has been yet to be determined in this situation. If this was a said and done deal, OBJ could have signed with Dallas weeks ago, in my opinion.
Now, it's interesting, Mike. I do want to bring you it's interesting. Von Miller's cast went right now for us, so we have tons of extra content that I didn't even have in my production notes because Von Miller gives us free content. Thank you, Von, for both your injury update and your Odell Beckham Jr. update. But I quote Von Miller here in his cast just 30 minutes ago here as we record here Tuesday night. We really appreciate smash that like button, and I'll throw you the quote. Really appreciate it. Helps us bring more content to the network.
Network. Helps us a ton.
Smash it for us. It does a lot. And for all of our on-demand listeners, thank you so much as well. So this is recording here as we speak Tuesday evening. Von Miller, I quote, says, "This ain't over till it's over." I don't think he's leaving. He also kept on that pose for 10 minutes. So, full court press. He's expected to be in town after the game on Friday.
How much does his health play a role in this? Von Miller's health, that is. Meaning if Von would have had a more serious injury that he would have been out for the year, I think it might have been decided. I think the biggest draw for OBJ coming to Buffalo, I don't think it's the Bills. I think it's to play alongside one of his best friends and try to win a Super Bowl. And he's mentioned wanting to have a place where he can call home for the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah,
that could probably be any of these teams.
Do you think a 1 year deal, or if you're Odell Beckham Jr., not the Bills or the Cowboys, 1 year? What do you want? 1, 2? What do you want? You don't want just a month, do you? Do you want just a month?
It depends. So if I'm as a Bills fan, I want a multi-year deal because I think OBJ still has something left in the tank, and I wanted to be part of this offense going forward. If I'm OBJ, I honestly think it does him best to not go after the multi-year deal right now. I would want the 1 year deal, make some plays in the playoffs, and then sign a longer term deal with money after showing I'm healthy enough to produce. But that's assuming that he is healthy and can play at a high level. If he's not, that might explain why he is trying to get his money now and sign a multi-year deal. So there's a lot of different moving parts here. We don't even know what to expect from OBJ. And there has been some rumblings from some of the national reporters that teams aren't 100% confident what version of OBJ they'll even be getting when he hits the field. Obviously, Beckham is trying to put out there that he's ready to go, that he's ready to make an impact. That doesn't necessarily mean that he is. I would hope that's the case, especially if the Bills are going to sign him. If they bring him in and they see that he's nowhere near ready to go, or that he's going to be 75, 80% of what he typically has been in the past, I would pass on him in that situation. So I do think it's important for the Bills to work him out and see what he has in the tank right now, because if he's still not at that point where he's ready to go and actually be a productive player, then what is the point going into the postseason bringing him in? You're bringing him in to make an impact. So he has to be at a high level if you're going to sign him to a deal, especially a multi-year deal.
I think he wants the comfort, and Vaughn, at least whether he goes to the Bills or not, is going to preach like, look, I'm later in my career, even older than you. OBJ just turned 30 a couple weeks ago, by the way, so he's still got some left in the tank.
Not even worried about 30. Like at age 30, wide receiver, you can still play football. So.
His market value right now per spot track is 2 years, $26 million. So the good thing is the Bills can get away in any team, I guess, the Cowboys, Giants, whoever's realistically alive here, can get away with using one of those years this way. You can pay him a prorated amount as high as you want. You're only going to have to pay him 1 month of that salary. So you could sign a 3-year deal. 1 month of it accounts for the 1 year of it already gone. So I think the Bills can get interesting with how they structure this deal and say roster bonus for March 13th. If you're still on the roster, $5 more million goes to you, and your contract becomes guaranteed. The Bills would, and Cowboys too. A team will do that. Either he's going to take a 1 month deal, which is possible, or he's going to take a deal laden with bonuses, laden with likely to be earned incentives, and maybe some unlikely to be earned incentives. So it really depends how interested a team is. And as he comes in on Friday, and if the Bills beat the Patriots, I think he'll have every motivation in the world. The Bills will be like, Vaughn's coming back. Our entire defense is back. As bad as it felt on Thanksgiving, Mike, and we haven't talked since then, it felt bad. It felt grim. It felt doom and gloom. We took a victory. It was a bad victory. It was this and that. We didn't blow them out by 40. There's so many, like, this is bad. We only won by a 23-second touchdown, field goal at the end of the game, which was a huge thing. Checked off a couple boxes. Josh Allen does come back in many games. 4 times this year he's led the team to a game tying or winning series. So there's a lot to be said. And now Josh is getting in full practices and the entire team's healthy, and you're adding Odell Beckham Jr. and you're getting Von Miller back, and Trey White's going to be full reps for Miami at least, maybe even the Jets, maybe full reps. By all accounts, maybe even this week full reps, because he just wanted one preseason game is what I've heard.
I mean, the health is going the right direction. Obviously, Von Miller was scary.
That stunk.
Josh Allen was scary. But once you get these guys back, it's full throttle. What everybody is scared of this Bills team is when they're healthy. And it does feel like they're getting in the right direction. You can add OBJ if he is healthy. It just adds another dimension to this Bills team. And the funny thing now is you're also starting to see the media narrative change, where there's some national doubt on the Bills. Chiefs are now the Super Bowl betting favorites. People are starting to get really kind of on the Bills for the close wins. It's when the Bills dominate everybody but lose a few close games, they don't know how to win close games. Now they win close games. Are they as good anymore? While people praise Philadelphia for winning all of those. So the contradictions are amazing. Robert, well, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. Kevin, I will let you get first dibs at this question here.
Man, it's a convoluted question. In your opinion, Robert asks, in your opinion, how many of 17's turnovers come from pressing? It looks like the layman, like, nothing comes easy lately. Davis drops a ball, the right tackle lets another guy go by, etc., and he tries to make up for it. He's a presser, man. Josh Allen presses. This has been his negative back to 18, back to 19, even when he came out of that rookie year. After he had his first elbow injury, many people don't remember. He came back better. Once that healed, the Bills sat him out 4 weeks. That's the difference here. He's playing these 4 weeks. The Bills sat him out 4 weeks with that injury. UCL's not long-term, and it shouldn't be an issue going forward. It's not, you have to get off-season surgery like Vaughn might. He's a presser. And I think that absolutely one of the biggest factors of this is the MVP talk. I really think when he was kind of facing adversity in that Jets game and kind of flashing forward to what he needed to do and presses, and really was at the top of the MVP race at that time.
Do you think pressing is the right word, or overly aggressive? Maybe you could say that they're the same.
Both?
I don't think Josh.
It's the same, right?
It's very similar, but I think there are slight differences. I think pressing is when you make mistakes because you're feeling the outside noise. I think being overly aggressive is a mindset. That's how you play. I think Josh right now is being overly aggressive. Yeah. He is trusting himself too much in situations where he shouldn't be. The interception against Minnesota to seal the game, I don't think that's him feeling outside noise and making a bad throw. That's him, I think, having too much confidence in himself that he can do whatever he wants.
Roy says arm arrogance.
Arm arrogance is a better description, because sometimes when you can make some of the plays that Josh Allen can, you don't have that self-doubt that is required to be a great NFL quarterback at times. It's the Brett Favre syndrome. You can do some of the most remarkable things on the field, but then you also have to know your own limitations at times. And I think sometimes Josh doesn't always have that thought process. But I will say,
Mike, is he pressing for his defense, though? He knows that kicking a field goal won't get it done. He just watched his defense barely only do one thing in that game. That was stop a goal line drive that put them on the inch line. That's all they did in the Vikings. Literally it.
It's the Jets.
Is he pressing for his defense?
I even think some of the interceptions, some of the turnovers were just lack of seeing the field properly. The Jets' first interception, when he's rolling out, defensive end in his face, he just doesn't see that there's a guy on Dawson Knox. The turnover on
against the Lions, dude, that was a great. It was actually a bad play call. They knew the play was coming.
The turnover where he fumbles the snap and leads to a Vikings touchdown at the end. That's just a freak play. So I don't want to say pressing. I do think his injury is impacting him. I think that's clear at this point. There are certain throws that he is missing that you would consider routine for him, that we haven't seen him miss this poorly since he was a rookie. And I think Tony Romo hit on an important point. I said, I think during one of the earlier interviews we had on the show, he said during Thanksgiving that Josh is a few weeks away from being healthy again, fully healthy again. And when Romo is saying that, he's not just making crap up out of nowhere. The broadcasters get 20 to 30 minutes to sit down and talk to the players and coaches prior to every game. And a more respected broadcaster like Romo is going to get more insight. And oftentimes they don't reveal all the stuff that they're told. And we're going to get right to your second super chat in 1 second here. But when Romo is saying something like that, that is Josh directly telling Romo, right now, this injury, it's impacting me a little bit. I'm going to be back to full health in a couple weeks. And if you remember, you obviously referenced the UCL injury he had his rookie year where he sat and then he came back stronger. Josh Allen also had, I believe it was a shoulder injury in 2020 against the Raiders, where he started the year hot and then went through a stretch of 3 or 4 weeks where looked kind of average. And one of the broadcasters said, he's not feeling great. Give him a couple weeks. And then what happened? Went off, tore it up at the end of the year. I do believe Josh battles through certain injuries out there that maybe some other quarterbacks wouldn't be out there playing with, and that we're hard on him because we're used to excellence. But this is Josh battling through. When he does get fully healthy in a couple weeks, I think we're going to see that excellence return. It's not like scoring 25 plus points is bad as it was. And Kevin, I'll let you take over again with this.
Yeah, and I think this point is even just as good by Robert. We've talked a lot in our chats and offline about the scheme and is it doing him any favors. I think part of the reason Ken Dorsey got the job was because he was going to let Josh be him. He wasn't going to come in and change the scheme and run a totally different style of offense, a completely new system that, Josh may have to argue with. Part of the issue has been for this team to say, hey, Josh, just go do whatever. Like that is what it feels like at times where Dorsey's calling plays like, hey, there's a kill route. There's calling 2 plays in the huddle. You're calling second play and that Josh can check to, you're doing option routes. 3 guys are running into each other, back to that play you referenced in the end zone against Minnesota where 3 guys were literally 10 yards apart. No one pulled off Patrick Peterson off that route.
Crowded space, a lot of, I forget what they called, but the trailing routes as well, where they'll have McKenzie run basically the same route short. The scheme has been an issue. Dable drew up a bunch of easy touchdowns for this Bills offense in the last few years. Things almost came too easy for them at times, which is kind of the funny part about the season, where the Bills are actually higher overall in scoring ranks, yards per game ranks, but it doesn't feel like it's coming easier. Josh has had to be that hero quarterback on a game-by-game basis. So, yes, it is the unfortunate thing where, yes, we're not making it any easier on Josh right now, but that's the part where you're lucky you have a quarterback of that talent where he can battle through and still get you results, even when it's not an easy situation for him. So thank God Josh Allen is the Bills quarterback, because I think Dorsey's going to get better, but it has not been a great run of it in recent weeks.
Notably, like we talked about with Mark and even a little bit earlier on the show with Christopher, was the fact that the red zone offense has been so poor. And that comes back down to this topic that Robert brings up, is the offense and the scheme. There's been some issues in the red zone. It's been, kind of a lack of creativity. They haven't found ways to beat zone coverage. They have obviously done well against man. We saw Isaiah McKenzie's like a man beater. He's on the roster to beat man coverage. We haven't seen a ton of it with Josh Allen. You see a lot of too high. You don't see a lot of man coverage, but when you do, that's when Isaiah McKenzie's very useful in an offense. And that's why he's active and what he can bring as really a really good receiver against man coverage, period. So that's, the Bills see little of it at times. When you see man coverage against not as good slot corners, that's when you get the best of Isaiah McKenzie. Now, anyways, you fast forward to potentially what the Patriots might do we need to see more creativity in the red zone. Now, Mike, you mentioned it earlier with, will Josh be the better version of himself coming off of an injury? It's starting to be going toward that way because full practice, we'll see what Wednesday says, probably full practice is a pretty good place to be compared to a game plan when half the locker room's sick. Half the, he's not literally throwing. Like,
he barely practiced for 2 weeks.
He's running around, and doctors themselves said, like, he wasn't going to play as of Monday, that week that he played against the Vikings. He wasn't playing. So it's easy to say. And the Bills still almost went out and went 3-0 in that stretch. So I think that they feel going 2-1 with a fumbled snap touchdown / pick in the end zone in overtime, away from being 3-0 during Josh Allen's elbow gate. Like, I don't know. That's
could be 11-0.
That's definitely better than Case Keenum. I think that they feel like they're in a better spot than had Case Keenum started 3 games. I really do think that
100%.
with the
100%.
defense maybe pressing, back to the pressing question, and struggling straight up. They're missing one of their best players. They were missing a lot more. The defensive line rotation was literally Shaq Lawson, who thank God that they kept, and Boogie Basham, and they weren't even really playing Mike Love. They had no rotation going on in the defensive line. Then you have, AJ Klein off the street playing. You have Dodson struggling. You have a cornerback mixture. You have Trey White coming in early in the game and looking good, shutting down the lines. I know it was only 2 series, but his numbers came out pretty good. There's just a lot to digest with the Bills defense. And the Bills felt like they were in a better situation with 2 wins and an overtime loss with a fumbled snap. They felt like it was a pretty good scenario for potentially people talking about Tommy John, people talking about at least 4 weeks. I mean, that's what you're able to get out of those 3 weeks. I mean, you take that all, 3 one-score games, 2 of them being wins. I think for sure you take that any day of the week. And is this the first week you see full strength Josh? I think you see full strength Josh against the Jets. They lost to the Jets. 10 more days of rest. That at home, I just think the Bills will save that score. We'll have Ty back on from Let's Talk Jets next week. I think that's when you start to see full strength Josh next week. And if he's able to bridge it here with his 4th game off the injury, to me, that's really where you this is the kind of the make or break of like that 4 weeks. That was probably, he was sitting out probably till this game was, I would have guessed this would have been the game he would have played. I would have been close to him playing.
And you got to say, Kev, thank God we had Josh for these 3 games, because with how they all went, I think it's possible it could have been an 0-3 stretch. I was confident that the Bills could have won a few of them with Case Keenum going in, but the way that they played out and how tight they ended up being, I think it's very realistic. The Bills could have lost the last 2 games, and that would have happened. You would have been talking about 6-5 right now in must-win situation against the Patriots. So thank God Josh was able to battle through, because even 85% Josh Allen is still better than the majority of quarterbacks in the NFL. And we do have to just share this quick message from Greg Thompson from one of our great sponsors for Cover One.
Hey guys, Cover One is excited to announce our new partnership with BetUS. BetUS has a live wagering on all major games, the best betting variety in the business, and an easy deposit and withdrawal process with the fastest payouts in the industry. Our loyal Cover One fans get a choice between 2 exclusive offers, either a 125% sign-up bonus on your first deposit up to $2,500, or a free $50 bet with no deposit required. Just use promo code COVER1 on the links provided in the show description below. BetUS, where the game begins.
Great partnership we have there, actually, with TSE Buffalo as well. Get out there, check out TSE Buffalo. We have some great stuff. I scored a haul. Check out my tweet from a couple days ago of great Black Friday, Cyber Monday.
Kevin, ever since our partnership with TSE Buffalo and me speaking to Tyler Bass, all he's gone on to do is go 6 for 6 against the Browns, tying a Bills franchise record, and then getting a game-winning last-second kick against the Detroit Lions. So I don't want to say I played a role in that, but I asked him about his process. He told me what he does heading into every kick, who he looked up to. Mentioned obviously Tucker, Janikowski, likes to take a breath, go through his motions, and outside of the missed extra point, I'm not going to take blame for that. But Tyler Bass has been
Mike, you know what's funny about the mixed extra point? We had 2 guests on today. So I wanted to talk real quickly about the Thanksgiving Day game. We didn't talk too much about it. We usually recap the game at the end of the episode.
It worked out. The missed extra point helped them.
That was my question to you. Like, we talked about this. I think it was the Vikings game where we said, did them missed extra point on the Vikings end
It hurt the Bills. It hurt the Bills. Because here's the thing.
4 down offense.
If you trust that your defense will hold them out of the end zone, well, then yes, you want to make the extra point. You want to have the 4-point lead. But the deeper analysis shows when a team is trailing by 3
4 downs
with under 2 minutes left on offense, they play more conservatively. They play 3-down football, and if it's a 4th and 1 or kick a 45-yard field goal, they tend to go for the field goal instead, even though the numbers would say you got a good chance of getting this 4th down and still continuing your drive and having a shot to score and win the game. So you look at what Detroit had done against the Bills on Thanksgiving up until that point. They were converting on their 4th and shorts. They were aggressive the entire game. That 3rd and 1, they go for a decent length pass, incomplete. And then they settle for the field goal and the Bills ended up actually capitalizing when they put time back on the clock, because at first it seemed like that was going to be a negative for the Bills. Next thing you know, they kick the field goal. The Bills had 3 timeouts in 20-something seconds. I think it was 23 seconds. I felt confident the Bills were going to have a chance to kick a field goal and win the game, and they did.
Well, that's what was funny about the 11 seconds. Originally, that might have been the reason you go for it. Now, without that 11 seconds, I might agree with the decision to kick a field goal. There isn't much benefit to converting. Yeah, there's a chance you can get 10 more yards, make it a shorter kick. I don't know that you're going to go for the win in that situation. If I was Detroit,
I would have wanted that clock a little bit lower, because I would have wanted to take as much time off as possible.
13 seconds is like the line. You should know that. It should be about 12 seconds.
The Lions were very poor with their clock management throughout the game. Even the situation late in the first half when they had a chance to not run a play going into the 2-minute warning, they decided to snap it beforehand. And then even the way they were handling their timeouts, I thought Dan Campbell showed poor awareness, situational awareness with how he was running the clock. Loved his aggressiveness on the other 4th downs prior to that. But coaching in the NFL, you would think that in the year 2022, we would have a little bit better idea how to manage a clock, when to call timeouts, when to go for it, not go for it. And some of these football brains still don't get the most basic of concepts.
There's a lot going on as a head coach. You're making plays. You're in the emotion. You're going through injuries.
I'm not saying I could do it. I'm just saying that would be the one part I probably could.
I think it's the last thing you learn. Look, McDermott was terrible. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. He was pretty bad.
He's improved a ton.
He's gotten a lot better at it. He can focus more on. He has a quarterback he trusts. He can focus more on what's going on in game management stuff than calling the defense. So like, you're calling a defense. Let's say you're on defense. You're calling the defense. Like, you need to make a good play call on 4th down. And then you have to factor in the exact literal analytics around 2:03, 1:59 on the clock. It's a lot. They should be good at it. They get paid millions and millions of dollars.
The one common thing where a lot of teams will mess up with the timeout usage is when it's normally always around the 2-minute warning. When a lot of coaches, they will say a team gets a 1st down. They have 3 timeouts left, and they allow a 1st down. So a lot of coaches will let it go down to the 2-minute warning going into the 4th quarter. Then they'll call their 3 timeouts after the warning, and they'll get the ball back with maybe 140, 135. Call your timeouts before you get to that part. Make them run plays before the 2-minute warning, because then if you do get a stop, you're going to get the ball back closer to 2 minutes, not 135. It's basic math, but I do understand when you have all this other stuff going on, that's why you need to have someone besides you that can tell you this and tell a coach, hey, we need to call timeout right now. And,
the problem was,
hey, don't run a play before this 2-minute warning.
The problem with the Saturday situation, and McDermott actually is a little bit more like Saturday than he was Campbell in terms of like letting run too much clock. I don't hate it. I think it's the right solution to. Saturday got a little bit nutty with it, especially for not having a top offense when you don't have Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, etc. I don't hate running as much time off the clock as you can. You shouldn't get crazy with it, but you should err on not needing to rush in situations where you have 3 timeouts, where you're at the 50. You shouldn't necessarily rush in those situations. Analytics will show, Mike, you just said it. You don't want to leave 23 seconds on the clock. That's way too much time for the other team to get into field goal range. especially if that team has timeouts. Like the thing that people forget about 13 seconds, they had 3 timeouts. That's more than enough to run multiple plays. And it's just so hard to defend their best plays in a situation where they can throw anywhere. It's not just
we have to start changing the way we think about norms in football. Back even 10 years ago, you take a kneel if you got a kickoff return and you had the ball in your 25 with 40 seconds left in the half. Well, maybe if you have a crap quarterback that you don't have any faith in, yeah, you run the ball, you hand it off, you take the halftime. You got Josh Allen, you got 40 seconds, and you have a chance to score points on the board, and you have a couple timeouts. I think in hindsight, what Kansas City showed is that when you are playing an elite offense, there's no time low enough to where you are safe. Anything can happen. Even Baltimore against Jacksonville, Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, they got the ball back with almost no time. Justin Tucker, 67 yards is an outrageous distance to try a field goal. But there was a little part of me that had my heart racing, wondering, can he do this? And he came up short. But you get 5 more yards, he probably makes it. So unless you are up 4+ points, all you really need is 15 to 25 seconds to receive a ball, get a field goal range.
Well, when you need just a field goal with as good as kickers, you mentioned Bass are.
These kickers can make it from so long.
That's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary that you don't need a ton. You get it at the 25. You need 30 yards, 30, 35
That's
yards.
another part of the game. Now with the touchback being the 25-yard line. And you know what? That's another decision that we can discuss about Dan Campbell and did he mess up. They kicked it through the end zone. They didn't even take any time off for the Bills. What were we saying all after 13 seconds? We were saying the Bills should have squibbed it. They should have.
They win if they squib it. The Bills win if they squib it.
Why did Dan Campbell have the Lions kick it through the end zone? Makes no sense at all. Granted, Josh Allen still threw a dart, and the Bills would have, if he completes that dart, would still have been closer. Maybe he's afraid of a missed kick where the Bills get good field position. I'm wanting as much clock off as possible before that ball gets to Josh Allen's hands. And I think that was a mistake, in my opinion.
Yeah, it still didn't matter as the team had extra plays down in the red zone. All right, basically almost got to the red zone. But yes, you're right. In theory, that's the right play. We talked about it all offseason, and I'm going to die in the horse that they definitely win the game, have they squid the ball. Maybe the Lions would have, maybe they wouldn't have. But
I still think the Bills win, but it might have made a difference. And I get it. Squib is a risky proposition, but you saw what the Bills did when they squibbed it. Most of the time, you get a minimal return.
Is it risky though? Like, what's
the risk is that your kicker completely botches it, and you end up giving up great field position. And then the other risk is because it's not your traditional kickoff coverage that something fluky could happen. Obviously, we all remember the Music City Miracle, the one time that a squib kick backfired on a team. But I would say if you trust your return coverage unit, a squib kick makes sense because it's typically a non-returner who's taking the ball and getting 5 to 7 yards, and you kill about 3-4 seconds. And the other option, you could always do the more risky, kicking it short of the goal line, forcing a return. But that can obviously be dangerous depending on who the returner is.
Right. Whew, wow, what an action-packed show, Mike.
A lot today, Kevin.
An hour and 50 minutes. We had 2 great guests. Basically went 30 more minutes than we normally do. We had 2 guests on today. Mike, it's time. We haven't gotten score predictions in. We have to rip these off. I know there's no film room tonight, right?
I'm not sure, but we got to be quick either way.
Okay, Mike, throw your score prediction out. We heard Christopher's and we heard Mark.
What's the line? 5.5 right now. Bills favored.
Move to 5.
Do we know an over under what it's at right now?
Yeah, we do. So the line actually moved to 5 points in this game. So the over under is set at
46, 47.
Yeah, it was something pretty reasonable in this game. So it's 43.5. The line actually just moved to 4, -4.
Yeah, I'm getting a little nervous with this line being tight, but I'll say something. Bills 20. I like the 27-21. Okay. But that over under at being 43, you don't normally see that with the Bills being such a low low total. I'll go Bills 27-21. I think they're going to have a solid game plan for the Patriots. I think you're going to see Josh Allen look sharp, but the Patriots, they always find a way to make these games tight for 3 quarters. I think in the end, though, the Bills will get it done.
I agree. I have the Bills covering the spread in this game. I don't think that you'll see the Bills win with a cover. I know the Bills have been 1-5 against the cover lately. I don't think this is the situation or the game where the Bills will win, but they'll cover I don't think they'll win by 3, for instance. I do believe the Bills get it done. I have it as a little bit higher of a scoring. I think you see a very similar to the Vikings game. They're going to run out of tendency. I asked Mark if he thought the Patriots did well. I think the answer was no. I mean, I don't believe they did very well in out of tendency in a cover in a different situation like a cover 2, dropping 2. I don't believe they played specifically very well in that situation from what I was able to see from the Vikings-Patriots game out of their typical what they like to do, as Mark said, cover 1, cover 3, different situations like that, and not with their too high look. So I do believe that the Bills are going to be too much, and I think you see a healthy Bills team minus Von Miller and Micah Hyde. We'll see what Deion Dawkins is able to do here tomorrow if he's able to go. But outside of that, the Bills are pretty healthy. So I have a score of 30-17. Buffalo is a number that I've been jumping out at, covering the spread and also the over in this game. I think the over at 43 is fairly easy money. I don't want to say fully.
Whenever they have something that seems ridiculous, there's normally a good reason why.
I don't see a 20-17 game. I really don't. I could be wrong. We'll have to see on Thursday.
I hope you're right. I
30-17. I'm feeling real good about 30-17. It just jumped out to me yesterday. So as we see some score predictions come in here, Roy says 31-23. Jason says 24-13. Jason, I also liked your opinion on the squib kicks. I do believe you're right with the negative is, like Mike said, 10 to 15 yards ahead of where they should have had the ball, negating the time lost on the clock for that. So you're probably right. And maybe it's harder to execute with your return coverage than it is on Madden. So that's very possibly why people don't do that in situations where it's a little bit harder to fully execute at the end of the game when you don't run too many squibs. So I'm always okay with bad offensive teams. All history says the Bills actually played some good offensive teams, Mike, in Cleveland and Detroit. They were DVOA pretty good.
The Patriots team is one of the lowest ranked DVOA offenses.
Okay, there. The Bills defense has been struggling. They need a good right defensively. I'm okay with a little bit of struggle on offense. I need to see the defense get a little bit right, and at least on the defensive side of the ball, I know we're going to be yelling about the offense a little bit. I think that Josh Allen will always figure it out in these situations. I don't think the Thursday night benefits New England very much. They played on Thanksgiving too, to a situation to where they are missing some offensive linemen. They're missing their really 1B. I think the Bills are able. They don't have a receiving core that they trust a lot. I think you're going to see a lot of short passes. The Bills are going to allow that to happen. So we'll see what happens throughout this game, Mike. But an action-packed 2 hours from the Going Deep podcast. We really appreciate no film room tonight on the Cover One Podcast Network. We had them breakdown. We had Nate Geary on breaking down with Eric Turner just a couple of days ago in their film room session. So I think that was probably early. So no film room tonight. So we're happy to fill in some extra time here. Had some great, appreciate Mark Schofield from SB Nation coming out, and as well as Christopher, as he was a great guest too. So make sure you go out and follow Christopher from the Boston Globe and the Believe podcast network. So from Kevin and Mike, we'll be back at you next Tuesday at 7 to talk a little bit about this game, but we'll have Tyson back and his loyal followers to talk Jets and a game where, it could be pretty interesting for the Bills.
Talk some Jets and an Ohio Bobcats MAC football championship.
Who cares?
Snapping a 54-year drought. The green and white are the good guys this weekend. Next week, they're the bad guys.
Okay, fine. Whatever you say. We'll see who wins the MAC's pretty poor football conference as it's turning out to be, in a pretty poor
team in the state of Ohio, the Ohio Bobcats.
Pretty poor basketball conference too. From the U.S. men's national team pulling off of not an improbable.
Go USA.
We didn't know which way that would go, so it was really interesting taking down a really tough Iran team, as well as getting it done against England in a tie scenario where England's been pretty much beaten up on everybody. So that was cool to see. The U.S. men's national team will play Saturday, so something for you guys to watch from a sports standpoint. But from Kevin, that's Mike. We will really appreciate everybody coming on. And yeah, we do see your comment. 2818 says Steve.
Appreciate the comments.
Appreciate you from Twitch as well. And for all on-demand listeners tuning in on we'd love you guys to come on and chat if you're ever able to, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. live on the network. But Kevin, that's Mike. We'll catch you guys here 7 p.m. from the Cover One Podcast Network next week with Tyson Rauch from Let's Talk Jets.
Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown.
Play action.